I'm so excited for this topic.
Yeah.
Oh, also, my name's Lyndsey.
Hi.
Casey's out of town this week, studying for her doctorate.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought she was just I thought she was doing something with Posey.
She did take Rivers.
Okay.
And so maybe she's doing something like
That's
that.
what I thought it was. I don't think she has to go back to do that again.
I thought she was there for her cohort.
Who knows?
Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, she's out. And so I'm here. And we're talking about friendship in marriage this week. It's week 4 of marriage. I've been so excited for this particular week.
Really? Why come?
I don't know. I just think Adam and I were besties before we ever started dating or anything like that. And so I just think...
For how long?
Oh, we knew each other because we went to college together.
Okay.
So we were both in the same department. So we knew each other, but we were very good friends. We knew each other for like a year and a half, and then we were very good friends for like 6 months. The first semester of our senior year, we had all of our classes together. So we were like best friends. Second semester, we were dating. That's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Was all the classes together accident or?
That's what I need to ask him that. I think it was like just a happy accident that we were both in the communications department and both seniors.
Right.
One of the classes, his first year, he got like really, really sick and ended up failing that class. And so he had to take it again, and it was with me. And so that kind of made his whole schedule fall into like the same as my schedule.
Okay.
Which was, Now, the following semester, he took a bunch of the same classes as me just because I was taking them. But we were already dating at that point.
Okay.
But
Nice.
I think friendship and relationship is so much fun.
Yeah.
I just like, that's the part where I feel like, I don't know, you start to really enjoy life.
So you get a smile on your face, and I tend to want to roll my eyes.
Really?
Yeah,
Really?
not at you, but
just
at
in general?
the people who are like, I married my best friend.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And I'm just
it
like,
does come off
please.
that way. Yeah. I do think, what is that? What is missing if you don't have friendship? And then what is like...
Oh, man. I
Yeah.
mean, what is missing if you don't have friendship? I mean, potentially a marriage. There's quite a lot missing. The more I thought about it this week. So honestly, I think before this week of study, if you had told me, if someone had said to me, do you need to be best friends with your spouse in a marriage, I would have hesitated.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known because probably more based off my own experience. Heather and I don't share a lot of common interests. At least these days we don't. Early on, we never really have. And that doesn't mean we've not enjoyed each other. We just like different things.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I think my idea of friendship would have been more like someone who's eager to go do, what you want to do.
Yeah.
They love watching movies together or whatever, or we like, same things, this and that. And Heather and I just don't have a ton of like shared interests in that way. We've had to work to try to find some common ground in that way. So I would have been a little hesitant, and probably, if somebody had with great exuberance told me they had married their best friend, inwardly I would have been rolling my eyes for sure.
Yeah.
Just because... Yeah, it just seems a little sappy, sweet, Hallmark movie kind of thing. But the more I dug into it, the more I've come to the conclusion that no, I do think your spouse should be your best friend. And the way I was saying it this weekend was like, don't, that might trigger for you all the feelings of, sixth grade and BFFs and all the stuff that we do of, friend ranking and whatever and silliness. But really, I think if you stop and think about like who's actually your best friend, the person who loves you best, the person who knows you best, the person who's for you most, that kind of thing. I think it should undoubtedly be your spouse, because sexual attraction isn't enough to hold a relationship together, and neither is, I think, just commitment, pure commitment by itself. I think you need the vitality, the warmth, the life of a friendship.
Yeah. I think without friendship, it robs you of a lot of joy and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So someone just loves me because I'm beautiful, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And somebody just loves me because they said they would love me. It's like,
that's really good.
Don't you just like me? Don't you want to just hang out sometimes and like be interested in what I'm interested in, or at least try? Like that's, I think, where you can start to have a lot of joy and a lot of fun in relationships. And it's so fun. So I'm curious, you're looking at Ephesians 5, and we know that friendship is important to marriage. It's not in there.
Yeah.
So how did you end up on this?
Well, I mean, some of it's just topically we said we think we need to talk about this. And I do think it's a key aspect to marriage. The Bible isn't often organized the way that we think about, that kind of culturally we sort of would organize thoughts and ideas. And so sometimes when you're teaching a passage, you would follow the flow of the passage. And then sometimes you're teaching around a topic or an idea, speaking about marriage. And while friendship isn't a word that gets used in Ephesians 5, or let's say even in Genesis 2 or in other places, it is implied in different ways. And even just lived experience would tell you that it's a necessary part of relationship. And so then you're left to say, well, how do I, how would we talk about this? And so really what I noticed was that in Ephesians 5, what Paul's doing seems to be saying, really not just Ephesians 5 everywhere, that he gives commands. What he does is he says, he points to Jesus first, and he says, now you do the same thing. Philippians 2 is a great example of this, where he says, have the same mind in you that is yours in Christ Jesus, that something like he, being in the form of God, did not think equality with God a thing to be grasped. It's a popular passage. If you read it, you probably know it. But the idea is he's pointing to Jesus, and he's describing his nature, his character, the way he lived his life, the way he loved and served and so forth. And then he's saying to the church in Philippi, now you do the same. You think the same. You treat other people the same. He does the same thing in Ephesians. Everywhere where he's giving commands, he's pointing back to Jesus. And so the principle is, if you want to know what fill in the blank looks like, pick a Christian virtue, love or generosity or care or service or compassion. If you want to know what power looks like, strength, leadership looks like, look at Jesus. This is the idea. What are the key characteristics, or what's he like? Yeah. And then you embody those things. And so what we're going to, the idea was this weekend, if we're going to talk about friendship, then we would apply the same principle that Paul has applied here. And we would say, okay, well, if we want to know what friendship looks like, and the Bible does have some things to say about friends. Proverbs specifically has some things to say about friends. But if you want to know what a true friend looks like, and there's a passage, I don't even know, you might know where it's at. It's a friend that sticks closer than a brother, right? So Jesus is described as a friend in John 15. He calls himself a friend, or the disciples, his friends. Moses is said to be, or God is said to have spoken to Moses like one would speak to a friend. So if we want to know what friendship looks like, then we would look at Jesus and see, how did he do it? And so that kind of then became my sort of organizing principle for the whole of the sermon. Which I think
is that concept is cool, because I think people will say things like Jesus is the fullest expression of Christianity, or that's the aim, or that's the goal, and the fullest expression of what you should be doing. But it feels sometimes a little impractical. What do you want me to do with that? So this was a really just to take friendship and then look at the way that Jesus modeled it, I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and I think, I suppose you could go to the Gospels and look at the literal accounts of Jesus' life, and that would probably be instructive as well. But also to think more about the pattern of how God relates to us, how Christ came to us, which is what we did this weekend.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of looking, maybe it's probably, I suppose that's the difference in personality types. I tend to look more at the forest, and some people see the trees. So, I'm looking at the bigger picture, kind of principles, if you will, of how Christ came to us, how he is a friend to us.
Yeah.
And arrived at the three thoughts that I shared this weekend: proximity, vulnerability, and glory.
Yeah. So there's 3 things that Jesus does, which you just listed off. The first one being proximity.
Right.
And you mentioned this weekend incarnation. Can you talk about that concept a little bit for anyone who's like, okay, what? Literally
right,
what?
Sure. I want to say the word incarnation means in fleshing. So it's the idea that God took on a human body. So it's what we celebrate at Christmas. This is the idea of Christmas, or Advent, the coming of Christ. It is Christ becoming a human being. And really what you're meant to think about, meditate on, consider when you think about the doctrine of the incarnation is that God came close. So Emmanuel, God with us. This has its roots. It goes back from the beginning.
Yeah.
That God wants to dwell with mankind. And we see that there was a brief period where that was possible in Eden, but then it doesn't continue because of sin. Man is banished from the garden. And so what you're seeing from then on forward is God doing what he can do to try to reestablish relationship to the point that he ultimately can dwell with his people. Mm-hmm. So that does, in some sense, happen. That's what the tabernacle is. That's what the temple is.
Yeah.
God wants to live with his people, which is a remarkable picture, not just amazing to consider, but also is what the end of the book is about too. So if you go to the end my point in all this is that incarnation is not just a Christmas theme. It's a nice idea. God became a human being. Yes. But he did so to fulfill a broader desire, which is God wants to dwell with his people. That's Revelation. That's the end of Revelation 21 and 22. That's Genesis 1 and 2. Yeah. Is you see God wanting to dwell with his people. And everywhere in between, that's what he's trying to do. Yeah. Is get relationship restored so that he can live with his people. So again, that's what I'm saying about the tabernacle. If you think about like Moses, there's a tent. It was called the tent of meeting. His presence would be in this tabernacle. Then eventually they built a permanent temple in Jerusalem, of which the foundation is still there for the second temple, if you will. The first one was destroyed, so they built a second one. But anyway, that's the idea, that the presence of God would be there. Now the idea is that the presence of God lives in us. But I hope we can kind of all see the theme here. God's trying to come close. Yeah. And so the idea is that he comes close so that we might know him. We can be in relationship with him. And the key idea is that you would not know God unless he revealed himself to you. Yeah. He has to make himself known. God is not he's not someone I can see with my eyes or hear with my ears, except he reveals himself to me. And so, that's a bit of what we mean by when we talk about incarnation. Yeah, which is like hitting on the first 2 points totally, like proximity and vulnerability. Sure. Because to be known and to reveal yourself is totally vulnerable. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, for sure. But to go first in moving close. Right. And I think it's just as an aside, like not just on Christmas and not just at the end of the book in Revelation, what you were saying, like right now, God wants to be close to you, is in the Spirit working it in you, and all of that is like, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's kind of wild. Yeah, the idea, one of the ideas I wanted to get across was just that God has been pursuing you.
Yeah.
That God is the first mover in relationship with mankind, always. In relationship with you and with me, it's always God is the first mover. We respond,
Yeah.
but he moves first. So the principle is that God comes close. Jesus, the Word became flesh, dwelt among us. That's John 1:14. He's come near to us. So the first principle of friendship that we see modeled in Christ is that if you want to be friends with someone, you have to step in some sense into their world.
Yeah.
I think that can happen accidentally. Two people accidentally meet that wouldn't maybe have otherwise met. I'm sure we have listeners with those types of stories.
Yeah.
I met my husband here, however, or whatever. There's all of those stories. I met my brother-in-law, Dave, who was a best friend of mine growing up. We met at 12, 13 years old because he just moved, his family moved from California to Oklahoma. He was a 49ers fan. I was a new 49ers fan, and we just kind of hit it off.
Yeah.
And we're best friends, and eventually married my sister, and now he's part of our family. So but that's a kind of accidental meeting, but I wouldn't have known Dave except we somehow our paths intersected or crossed or whatever, or our worlds collided. In the case of Jesus, it's an intentional thing. And sometimes for us, it's an intentional thing. I shared the story of meeting Heather this weekend, putting myself in her world again and again and again and again so that I could hopefully start up relationship with her. It worked.
Yeah.
But that's the idea. It's like in order for relationship to happen, I had to get close.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I tried to say in some of the services, I don't know that I got it out in all of them, was that I think some people, particularly in a world of loneliness, and it's like I can't meet anybody, or I'd like to meet new people or whatever. I have kids that are kind of in this boat from time to time. It's like, I don't know anybody, or I don't have as many friends as I'd like to have. Well, you're going to have to step into someone else's world.
Yeah.
And maybe that means leaving what you've known. So maybe that looks like showing up at something new, putting yourself in an uncomfortable. I wonder how many people are lonely but are also unwilling to change, unwilling to step out, unwilling to put themselves in a new place. And I think if you're going to find some people, you're going to have to step out of what you know. So, at Church on the Move, that shows up in, small groups and mid-sized groups and Bible studies and all the different things that we do, which are aimed at helping you learn. But we also know that the byproduct of those is that friendships, deep relationships can and do often happen.
Yeah. I think the old adage, you got to be a friend to make a friend.
Sure. Yeah. That's what it is.
You gotta put yourself out there, but also you gotta be the one that's showing up. And I do think that when you think about it, that God did that first, kind of heals that. Have you heard people say this before? But I'm always the one that has to show up, or I always have to go first, and that sort of thing. And it's like,
well,
okay, the Lord is doing that.
Sure.
And
sure.
So you can too.
Yeah.
Keep going first. And
for sure.
Just keep being a friend and all of that sort of thing. I was thinking so much this weekend with proximity and getting into someone's world. You had talked about how in the starting of a relationship, that's pretty natural. You're like, what are you into? You kind of talk about those things, but you have to keep getting in someone's world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the principle there is that friendship isn't a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or let's just say relationship isn't a set it and forget it. Whether that's boss to employee, coworker to coworker, brother to sister, friend to friend, or husband to wife. Relationship has to be maintained.
Yeah.
It doesn't just stay where you last left it.
Yeah.
So the example I was giving of this was of these plants that, Heather's planted in our back porch that I water with. Well, she waters them most days, but when she's gone or whatever, I get to go out there and water them. And, you learn really quickly that if you don't water these plants, they die, or they wilt up at least, and they eventually die. But they respond to water really quickly. It's amazing. If they don't have water for a little bit more than 24 hours, they start to look terrible.
Yeah, they're like, ugh.
Yeah, all shriveled and awful.
Yeah.
You give them water and they thrive. And I think, what I was saying this weekend was just, I want you to think of your relationships as a plant.
Yeah.
Like it has to be cared for in that way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what happens is we get married and then we stop entering into our spouse's world. And especially if, I hate to say it, but like if your relationship was initially based on physical attraction, then, and that may have been, but you're going to have to work hard to then build relationship from there.
Yeah.
That's why probably starting a relationship purely on the back of physical attraction is not the best idea.
Yeah.
Because you may, that friendship may be harder to build if you don't know the person very well.
I was thinking about with this idea of building a relationship with someone about my dad when I was in, oh my gosh, I think I was maybe in junior high when the Twilight movies came out.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I kind of want to be into these. And I know it's so dumb, but my dad took me to see Twilight.
Okay.
And he did not make fun of it. He was just like, she wants to be into this. I'm going to be into this.
Nice.
And it was so oh my gosh, you did not have to do that, but you want to know me. And he also bought the Avril Lavigne album when I was in maybe 5th grade. And he was like, yeah, I can see what you're into here. And just always, so there's this concept, I guess it's from the 70s, but people are saying it online these days now, which is don't yuck somebody's yum. And it's if somebody's into something, don't make fun of it. Just be interested in it too.
Oh, wow. So that's convicting because I yuck other people's yums all the time. That's my specialty.
It's kind of hard not to because it's but I just thought about, I felt really convicted about that with football because I was never into football, but my relatives are, and Adam is so into football. And last summer I went to the Eras tour with Taylor Swift, which I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I got a couple daughters. I know. I yuck their yum all the time, especially when it regards to Taylor Swift.
I know. Everybody does. When I got back, I can't even tell you. People would literally ask me, how was the concert? Just so they could interrupt me and say how terrible she is.
Wow.
And I'm like, thank you. I will never be friends with you. That is not how you make a friend.
This is a good learning for me. I'm glad we're having this conversation.
You have to,
I have not. Yeah, I'm terrible at that. So I think what I think, and it's probably the nature of my personality. I am, how would I put it? I don't move.
Yeah.
I know what I like.
Yeah.
And what I like is good. And so I'm strongly opinionated, and I don't think too much about. I just kind of treat other people like they're very much the same.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't think it doesn't help you enter into someone else's world. I guess what I'm saying is I feel like I can kind of stand over where I'm at, and if I hate what you like, I can criticize it and think that you should still like what you like and be fine with my criticism.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody likes it when someone else is yucking their yum.
Yeah. I know. I love it so much.
Yeah.
It just kind of, I think sometimes, so I think about some of my family members, and no hate, but the way that some of my male family members would talk about things that their spouses were into, just that is so stupid. I'm not going to go watch that girly thing. And it's just dude, you expect her to
wow.
do all
to understand that or to somewhat respect what you like.
Yeah.
to give it some kind of respect.
But you didn't. You just
Yeah.
called everything
Wow.
she's into stupid. And
Which, and I
women do
found-
that too. It's not just a dude thing, but like,
No, but this is fun. This is fascinating, and I'm glad we're talking about this because this is helping me. So yeah, I mean, I've got a couple daughters that like Taylor Swift, and
Yeah.
I don't hate Taylor Swift. I have no I don't look at her and think what an awful person. I mean, I
Right.
don't love her, but
some people do.
some people do. I don't care enough to.
Right.
But I am fascinated by all the attention that she gets
Yeah.
and why people like her as they do. And so I've
Yeah.
tried to kind of deconstruct some of that, but I've done it from a critical eye. And my daughter, will watch this and I don't know. I can't. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around the adoration of
Yeah.
everything she does is just wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't get it. And so in asking those questions, here's what I found. The reason I'm bringing this up is
Yeah.
I'll try to ask questions, but she can feel the tone,
It's like,
and she doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's like but I'm just trying to understand. But it's done with a critical eye, and so I'm not really enjoying it with her
yeah.
or allowing her to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm just criticizing what she likes, which I've found and noticed feels like criticism of her.
Yeah. And I think with vulnerability, which is the next point, it makes someone far less likely to share something with you again.
No doubt.
If they let you, they kind of took a risk of
You are so right,
sharing
Lindsay.
their interest, and then you crush it. It's like, oh,
This is a massive criticism of me today. Like,
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
This is my problem right here. So crushing dreams, criticizing. This is with Heather, with my daughters, with really anybody, because I'm just so opinionated.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of how I like to
Yeah.
converse. I like to do battle,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that doesn't make friends very well.
And I do think that because I'll talk about this sometimes and Adam will say, but it's okay to disagree. You don't have to just
Sure. Yeah.
but I think once you've earned that trust with someone of I know that you're going to be interested in what I'm interested in, we can kind of battle with each other.
And what you're talking about, and this will tie into vulnerability. So let's just kind of dive in. Let's just do it. Okay. So what I've learned is that you have to, if someone's going to share themselves with you, there has to be safety,
Yeah.
emotional, relational safety. It's what you're talking about. And I don't like using that term because I think we live in an oversafe world.
For sure.
So I don't know of a better way to describe it, but safety, I think, is it. I think safety is, what I mean is that if I share something with you, it's what you were talking about. You're not going to laugh at me
Yeah.
or yawn or criticize.
Yeah.
And so with Heather specifically, it will be, she has said this to me many times. Why would I tell you what I'm really thinking when you're just going to criticize it? Mm-hmm. And in my mind, it's like, but you put forward an idea, and ideas need to be
Now we look at it.
vet.
Yeah.
But this is what I found, and I think this is also a thinker-feeler difference, at least in Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
In the feeler world, the way I understand it to function is that they don't detach themselves from their ideas and situations.
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
I easily can go, here's an idea. I'm not part of that idea. Criticize it away. I can even take my own actions and put them over here, and we can look at them and go, that was stupid.
Yes.
And I don't feel personally attacked.
Yeah.
But there's a lot, I've got several members of my family who are not wired up that way.
Yeah.
So if to criticize an action or an idea is a total direct criticism of them.
Yeah.
They feel it very personally. And that has taken me a long time to appreciate or to understand. So when Heather wants to put forward a dream or a thought or what if we bought a house and I did the GC work on remodeling or whatever, and I'm like, but I mean, you have no experience. So my first reaction wants to be, you have no experience doing anything like this. You've never done
Yes.
you've never GC'd anything, small or big.
What is GC?
General contractor.
Oh, okay.
So you'd be running all these contractors.
Oh my gosh.
And I just think that sounds like, what I know of Heather's personality, coordination, details, not her strong suit. So my first reaction to an idea like that is to go, well, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, which just makes her want to shrink back into the kind of cocoon or safety of her heart and mind. And okay, so basically what she's learning is, I'm not going to share that with you. Yeah. I'm not going to, if I have another idea, I won't bring that one out because that just got totally criticized.
Yeah.
I think completely differently than that. I'm like, here's an idea. Tell me why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But that's not how some people. So I think this is, I guess what I'm saying is I think this happens in different ways for different people.
I definitely think so.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say I'm a huge feeler.
Yes.
If I'm in an environment where I know the person previously, so this is even with my relationship with God, previously has not, what I would say, been mean to me for being when I was vulnerable or used it as a way to make fun of me or so bad, bring it up later as a way to like, gotcha, hate that. But if I know I'm in a space where I'm with someone who is safe in that way, then I can more objectively look at something. So Adam will say things to me like, are we dreaming right now or are we being practical?
Oh, wow.
And I'll be like, first of all, that statement just in general like makes me so mad. I'll be like, that's
I can imagine.
Okay, whatever. Like, I guess dreaming. And he's like, well, and that's me moving toward him because he's so far more practical than I am. And so he's like, he needs to know what this conversation is.
Well, because to someone like me, it can feel like, so we're just in fantasy land right now and I just need to play along with it so you can feel okay. Is that what we're talking about here? Because this makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't, and I guess
I feel like Adam has said those words to me. And I'm like, well, sort of, honestly. I need to know, I think like ultimately I need to know that you believe I could do it if I worked hard enough or something like that.
Fascinating. And what if the answer is no, I don't believe that? I mean, isn't that like sort of how life works?
No, and I do think
you can't do everything.
I think that
you're not good at it all.
Where Adam eventually, has gotten to with me, where he could say that is not suited for you.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Right. The trouble is, and we're really talking about something very practical here. I think we've hit on a vein of something that probably is an issue for a lot of people. That is the negotiation of life, but dreams, desires, thoughts, plans, whatever. And trying to do that in a way that doesn't crush the other person. But also, for me, what I want to know as a thinker is, and let me be real clear about these words here. Thinker, feeler does not mean one person thinks and the other person is just led completely by their emotions.
Yes.
It does not mean that. And you'd have to. I'm not a Myers-Briggs expert, but that I know enough to know that's not what it means. We both think. Everybody thinks and everybody feels. It has more to do with a preference for how you. I
sometimes think it comes out in communication styles
for sure
more frequently than anything
feelers
else.
Are more. So feelers tend to understand more and are far more aware of the space, the relational space between two people.
Yeah.
So the way I had it explained to me by a psychologist was, thinkers, like if you could draw two circles, me, you, they just see two things. Feelers see a third thing, which is the relationship between the two of us.
Oh, wow.
So they're constantly thinking about
I definitely see
how are we doing? Yes. How is this and the kind of the state of the connection?
Yeah.
Of which is almost borderline invisible to me.
Yeah.
I just don't think too much about it. So I can I find this even with preaching. I've got Ethan being more feeler oriented and Seth as well. But there can be I can say things super directly in a sermon, that if I listen to them say the same thing, they'll say it with a lot of other, they'll put a lot around it.
Yeah.
Because they're really thoughtful about how that gets felt. And to the point, so I need them to help me understand, hey, that was a bit harsh.
Yeah.
And they need me to say, you could say that more directly because you're packaging it in so much, it's coming with so much bubble wrap around it that it's lost its impact.
Yeah.
It needs a little bit more impact to what you're saying.
As big feeler girl energy over here, I value so much that Adam is not like that. I think it's Adam is the longest friend I've ever had because we moved, as a kid, I moved so much. Right. So he's the longest friend I've ever had. And man, he can just be like, that's not okay. Don't do that. You need to look at that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, it really hurt my feelings when we first got married and for a really long time. But in the moving toward each other, it has made me grow so much more. So talk about this
for people, because I'm curious. How then, when we're talking about, for someone like me, who I feel like is all needles, and someone like Heather or you is like all balloons.
Yes.
How do I create, like, what do I need to do to make you feel safe?
Yeah.
To where you can, in a way that doesn't, if you can, doesn't violate who I am either, because I feel like I have a perspective for a reason. So what I have not liked about this whole negotiation is that between thinker feeler is that it can feel like that what I'm being said is you just need to stop and just be okay with whatever in the world I say, which feels like a loss of myself. Yeah. Just like you're asking me not to be me.
Yeah.
And not to have any perspective, just to lobotomize myself so that you can feel okay. That makes me think you're just so psychologically weak you can't even engage in a regular conversation.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like a me problem. That feels like a you problem. But I also know that there's some things I need to work on.
Yeah.
And even, the yuck my yum thing is a good one. Okay, so that's a way I've created the opposite of an unfriendly psychological environment where my daughter or my wife don't want to tell me what they really like or feel or any of it. Any thoughts on how someone like me could improve at this?
So when I went, I know some people are going to be like, I'm absolutely not going to do that. But it meant so much to me when Adam did this. I went to, like I said, the Eras Tour last year. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge deal last year. It's kind of toning down a little bit because she's been like in Europe or something like that. But it was a huge deal last year. Like everyone was posting about it. And so Adam would send me on TikTok anytime something from the concert was in there or anything. Sure. Just send it to me. And then slowly his feed was like a lot of Taylor
Swift. Just dominated by Taylor Swift.
Okay, I know this is a total example, but it meant so much to me and it felt like I was really safe with him. So by the end of this, because my sister and I got tickets in November and our concert was in July.
Right.
By maybe May, he was like, so what era are you going as? And I was like, how do you know that? And he's like, I don't know. We've been watching these videos. And I was like, I guess I haven't given it much thought yet, And then later he was like, do you know these chants? Because I don't want you to get there and you feel like you're the only girl that doesn't know the chants. Because I haven't historically been a Taylor Swift fan. Okay. I just know these last 3 albums a little bit. So he's like, you're gonna need to know these chants.
Wow.
And then he's like, we're gonna need to take you to the store and you need to buy some things for this concert. So he really
invested in
that. And last summer, I would say, was because he did that. And mind you, I've gotten back from it and he's like, I can't believe you like this album, whatever. We can still talk that way. He's not like, he's not allowed to say anything about Taylor or anything that. I did say to him the other day, like, you better watch it. You're trending toward I don't want to talk to you anymore about this. But he spent so much time investing in it. And honestly, like by the end of the concert, the football season was starting last year, and I realized I had done none of that investment for him. This is something he has loved since he was a little boy. Like,
sure. Yeah.
I have got to. So I was like, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I followed the Broncos on Instagram. And
you started to kind of get in the know of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wanted to do the same thing that he did for me because it was so fun.
Right.
So he ended up driving me and my sister to the concert. If we went in Kansas City and we couldn't, if you've ever picked someone out from Chief Stadium, it's terrible. They ended up having to close a road and you couldn't get to everyone. Adam was so thoughtful about this. He had put our dog's AirTag in my purse and he just left his 4Runner on the side of the road and came running to get me and my sister.
Wow.
There's people everywhere, traffic. I mean, it was insane.
That's awesome.
And so for me, that was when, and this was just a year ago, for me, that was when I was like, this is a safe guy to dream with. And this is a safe guy to like
really share
some things with.
Wow.
And that, and so then I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do the same for him. I'm going to learn football, and I'm not going to just learn it in this crap. I hate it so much when people will be like, move ball downfield. Like they're like making,
what is this?
They're making fun of football fans. And you'll hear that a lot at the Super Bowl or something like where they're like, oh, I get paid to move ball. It's just like, stop it. Don't make fun of, don't yuck someone's yum.
Yeah.
And so I realized, oh my gosh, I was doing that so much. And so I was like, no, I still don't know everything, obviously. I did learn this year some more position things, and I watched the draft. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. So that is like a really practical thing where it's like, if someone is interested in something, go all in.
Yeah.
Just drop.
Yeah. Enjoy it with them, I think, as best as you can.
Yeah.
Be the kind of person that can enjoy it with them.
Yes.
And I think for me, it is when Heather's sharing dreams to not meet them with criticism. There may be a place, and that's, I think, the thing is that I can see, when she puts forward an idea, my mind is so trained to jump ahead and think about all of the problems that there are with this. But that's not what she's really wanting to do just yet. And honestly, I think if you think about it in any relationship, it's like with your kids, it works the same way, adult kids. You see your kids doing things, pursuing things, choosing things that, you're like, that's not a great idea.
Yeah.
But then also I think back to my life in my early 20s, and it was like, I got to try this and this. And I learned a lot through those things. And if my parents were always standing there disapprovingly telling me that's a dumb idea or whatever, it wouldn't stop me from doing it. I just would do it and not tell them.
Yeah.
And so if I want to know what's going on in their lives, I can't constantly criticize what they're into.
Yeah.
I have to think about, I have to, in some sense, celebrate it. My dad did that with me when I was very young, and skateboarding and BMX and all this. If my parents had made fun of me the whole time or been like, come on, you're never going to be a professional skateboarder. And I wasn't. But if they didn't allow me to at least have the dream for a while, it would have, it wouldn't have stopped me from dreaming. I would have just started sharing my heart with either someone else or not at all.
Yeah.
And so I think, with Heather, it's just giving there some space. Because here's what's cool, is I think when you do that, it's not that they don't want to ever hear any critique or pushback or anything. It's just that the initial the initial conversation maybe isn't, like they probably are fully aware as well of some of the shortcomings of, in fact, it's like instead of me going, you could never GC this, she probably already feels some of that. Like, I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah.
If I would just ask more questions, stay a little bit more curious, she might come around to going, that's probably not a good idea either.
Yeah.
But if she's just met with criticism, then what she learns is, I can't bring this part of myself out, or you're going to smash me, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that's a huge learning.
And I think on my end as a feeler who totally just like throws ideas at Adam all the time, he will say to me, you're telling me this for the first time, and it feels like you've been thinking about it for a long time. And I'm like,
good.
Okay, I need to kind of like slow down a little bit here and be a better communicator to him of like, this is what I've been thinking about this. And I know it's kind of outlandish. It's probably like 50 years down the road or whatever, but wouldn't this be cool? And then he's like, okay, it kind of gives him those conversation context to place what this is. This isn't a next year idea.
You can see how proximity and vulnerability work together.
They're so,
They really do have to go together. So what we're talking about is that proximity, entering into the world of someone else in an encouraging way, because you care about them, leads them to then be vulnerable with you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a chance and share this with you. So in some sense, I think we've been talking about both of these things.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Because it's massively vulnerable to receive someone too that's coming to you, because you have to kind of say, oh, my ideas aren't the best ideas, or I need to just solely
you have
be
to kind
interested.
of push yourself down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in some sense treating another as more significant than yourself, which is literally a biblical command.
Literally. Yeah.
Literally treating
like
others
so
as, is that in Ephesians, I think? I can't remember.
I think so.
Yeah. I want to try to find that. Is it in Ephesians 4?
Let me just Google.
Bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit. No.
Oh, wait, that's with all gentleness and with all
where
humility.
is that part?
I thought that was 4.
Is it don't allow yourself promotion to hide in your hearts, but in authentic humility put others first and view others as more important than yourself?
Where's that?
Yeah.
Philippians 2:3-5.
That.
Oh.
2:3? Yeah, same love. Yeah. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others as more significant than yourselves. So that's the vulnerability of on the
receiving end.
Yeah, is that I have to, when I'm entering into Heather's world, I'm counting her interests as more significant than my own, even her perspectives, dreams, whatever is more significant, and being willing to sit in them and with them, even when they're uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
And honestly, learning how to, it's the hardest thing, how to be emotionally like the right thing for her at that moment, which is selfless, rather than just waiting to say what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Which might be, this is stupid, or this is a bad idea. Yeah.
For me, with Adam, so Adam is Hispanic. And so that whole learning curve was so vulnerable, because you're learning all these things that, he grew up in a lot of ways exactly the same as me. We grew up in Christian families in a Midwest town, but in other ways, completely different. And so learning how someone treats him versus how they treat me, that was just such a vulnerable, that was one of those for me where I was just like, whoa, I've got to get out of my own head and just hear what he is saying and receive him, and not put up these walls of like, but I don't think that, and it's just like, no, just receive. That was and still is an exercise, because I think that I can kind of like empathize and understand, but that is an area that I will never understand. And so I just have to receive.
Wow.
And vulnerability. But on the other end of vulnerability, not just receiving being vulnerable, you also have to be vulnerable yourself.
Yeah.
And that has been very hard for me.
I would imagine.
I'm like,
It doesn't surprise me because I think the feeler, that's it. I think the fear is I do think that's, so there's this, in it, I think for me the issue will always be learning, the humility of learning to enter into the world of another and not treat my perspective and wants and desires as the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole other group of people that their whole challenge is courage.
Yeah.
And being willing to trust and take a step forward. The fear is that I'll be rejected. And I think so little about any of that. That's not much of what goes through my brain. But I think there's a lot of people that is their issue. So the risk of being vulnerable is terribly frightening for them.
Quinn says it like this. When we walk into a room, we feel like everyone doesn't like us automatically.
Really?
And we have to win everyone over.
Wow.
But when my husband Adam walks into a room, he's like, everybody likes me.
Interesting.
Maybe it is that thinker-feeler difference. I've never thought about it in that context, and I mean, obviously everyone's different, but I wonder if it's like when you're so focused on the dynamic with everybody, like relationally or emotionally, that can like feel overwhelming sometimes.
I could imagine that. I think I just don't care.
Yeah. That's how
So I
Adam
don't walk
is.
in thinking they love me. I just think, what do I
That
care?
is more accurate of how I think Adam would feel.
Yeah. It doesn't even occur to me as to whether or not you like me or you don't.
Yeah.
Because I don't care. Not that I don't like anyone in this room, but the way I think of it is either I'm not friends with any of you, like not close. What do I care? 2, I'm never going to see you again. What do I care? What does any of this matter?
Yeah.
So that's why I think so little about small talk, moving around a room, making sure people know I was there. If I could go to a party and just sit in the corner and, wait it out and then leave. I don't hate parties if I know people. I don't like walking around making what I perceive to be meaningless conversation.
Oh my God, I can't stand
because
that.
again, but I don't think about this between us.
Yeah.
So when I'm sitting there talking to someone, I don't think about how the relationship is doing or how they're feeling or any of that. I'm just thinking about how do I get out of this? What can I do to walk away from this as quickly as possible?
I did find out that I'm an introvert this year because that is exactly how I feel. I'm like, get me out. I don't want to be here, but for different reasons. Mine is
interesting.
like, no one knows me and but I did. Okay, so maybe this was 2 weeks ago in your message, you talked about moving toward each other and you kind of become more like each other in some ways.
Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago.
So when Adam and I were driving home, he said, I said, how do you think, this is what I said, you have made me not care what people think more. And he said, that is so funny because I was going to say, you have made me care what people think more.
Yeah.
Both moving toward more healthy
totally agree.
Dynamics.
Totally agree. Heather's done the same to me.
Yeah.
Heather's done the same to me multiple times. Just like, it wasn't, but a couple months ago, she was like, we should go visit your parents this afternoon. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Not that I don't want to hang out with my parents. I'm like,
it just feels so
showing
random.
up at my parents' house.
Yeah.
Well, that's weird. What do I? And she goes, your mom would love to see you. You need to go over there. So we did, and it was great. It was great.
Yeah.
But she's the one that's like, get over there, go on, go talk to them. You need to go tell them, at a party, you need to go say goodbye before we leave here. You've got to go.
Yes.
Okay.
I have to tell Adam all the time. I'm like, do not leave without, did you just leave without saying goodbye?
Yeah.
Go back in there right now. Like, you cannot do that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's just like a husband-wife thing.
Yeah, that
because
could
I
be.
feel that a lot too. I'm like, you need to do this.
Say goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a bit more relational awareness that probably females just naturally, natively have. But also I do think we're wired up differently, and there's so we become
Yeah.
Like what you're saying, more like each other.
I think with vulnerability, this is a lesson I'm learning is that I want, and something I've been working on this year is I want to be someone who is easy to get to know. Because for so long, I kind of keep my...
Interesting. You felt like you had to be guarded.
Guarded, yeah. And so when, this weekend you're talking about vulnerability is being real with people. And so that does feel so vulnerable, but it is something that Christ totally modeled.
Right.
And you rob yourself of the richness of relationship when you live so guarded.
Yeah, I mean, well, so that's part of the incarnation as well, is that Christ became one of us, close enough to see, to hear, to touch, but also to hurt, to betray, to lie about, ultimately to crucify.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the reality that Jesus hung naked on a cross tells you that God was willing to become vulnerable. The fact that Jesus became a baby, helpless, so God is a helpless child, tells you that he was vulnerable.
Yeah.
So, I think vulnerability is an essential part of a friendship. And if you're not willing to be vulnerable, I would argue that you're not really friends.
Yes. Yeah.
You might be friendly with each other, but you're not really friends. Because to be a friend is to bear the burden of another person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I don't know why for like so many years it was so hard for me to go to the hospital and not tell anybody.
Wow.
Get sick and just not tell anybody. I don't want to be a burden on you. I don't want...
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to have to do anything for me.
Right.
And I remember when I got COVID 2 or 3 years ago, whatever, one of someone who goes to church here, she texted me and she was like, hey, I can bring you some coffee. I can bring you some cinnamon rolls, anything you need. And I was like, absolutely not.
Right.
Do not come up here. Do not.
Yeah.
And that is just looking back on it, I'm like, why, you egotistical weirdo?
Yeah, that's right.
That's so weird.
It's easier to offer help than it is to receive it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot like Peter when the Lord is going to wash his feet and he says, don't even think about it.
Yes.
Jesus says in return to him, if I don't wash your feet, then you have no part with me, in me. And he's like, all right, then my feet, my hands, and my head also. And he's like, just your feet.
Okay,
good.
just the feet.
But
yes.
But there's a humility, not just humility, but I think the idea is, what really humility is seeing yourself as you are.
Yeah.
And if you can, I think a refusal to be vulnerable or to be weak in front of other people is really speaks to this bigger desire. It is a need to be seen as competent,
yes,
together, self-sufficient, not a failure, not the burden, not weak or any of these things. But, again, think about it from a gospel perspective. We serve a God whose whole MO was, and the reason he was rejected is he wasn't strong enough. They didn't think he could be Messiah because he was weak, he could be crucified. He could be killed. That was it. That was the litmus test. If you can be killed, you ain't the Messiah. Because we know what the Messiah will do. That's why they said, if you really are the Son of God, come down off that cross. And, interestingly, there's some decent evidence that the cross wouldn't have been super high, but would have been fairly low. Think about tantalizingly low, 6 inches from the ground. Ugh. When you can't breathe, and that's how you die. You're hanging there, and it becomes incredibly excruciating. So because of the way you're hung, you would have to push up on your feet in order to breathe, and you can imagine how painful that would be. And so a lot of it was like asphyxiation. That's why they would break the legs to kill them, because they couldn't push up and breathe anymore, then they would die. And so, And so here's Jesus hanging naked, maybe 6 inches off the ground, where his enemies could look him in the eye and mock him and spit on him right to his face. So he's not at a distance.
Yeah.
He's right here. And you can say to him, if you really are the Son of God, come right off. So can you imagine, so tantalizingly close that you could just kind of step right off of that cross and, like have your revenge or show them who you really are. And he doesn't do it. And so it's this God who's willing to, first as a baby, but then ultimately in his crucifixion, his strength is made manifest in this weakness that's displayed.
Yeah.
And of course, that is the Christian way.
Yeah.
It's not strength through strength, but strength through weakness, life through death, victory through losing. This is how this happens. And so for Christians to this is why I said this week, and I think a lot of people have believed a false gospel.
Yes. Yeah.
You think that the gospel is, if I can put myself together, if I can demonstrate enough strength, if I can put together a great resume, then I'll be accepted. But that is not the gospel. The gospel is, of course, I'm a sinner. Of course, I needed salvation. And so I just don't understand why we would be reticent then to be seen as needing help.
Yeah.
It's because we've idolized John Wayne more than Jesus.
Yes. Yes.
And so what we like is strength and power and no vulnerability. I would challenge us to think about the people that you idolize in your life. I would challenge you to think about the people that you look up to and that you put before your kids.
Yeah.
Are they vulnerable? Are they willing to be vulnerable? Are they willing to say that they're wrong?
Yeah.
Are they willing to say that they've made a mistake? I'm not talking about getting in front of a big crowd of people and weeping and falling apart and acting like you don't know what in the world is going on. But if you can't say, I'm sorry, if you can't say I was wrong, if you can't say I missed it here, if you can't say I need forgiveness, if you can't say I've sinned, you're nothing like Jesus.
Yes. Yeah.
Nothing like Jesus. If you can't say I need help, if you can't say, and so, to me, that's just a hallmark of Christianity is vulnerability.
Yeah.
God went first, did it, demonstrated it for us. And I think that's what we're called to be.
Yeah. I think about how many people in my life, too, that I robbed of the gospel work, a really practical
and allowing them
work.
to serve you. To wash your feet, as it were. You stopped them from being able to do it because of pride, not out of humility, not because that's the way we'll couch it. Oh, I don't need that. Oh, you don't need to do that for me. It's actually we're too proud.
Yeah, and I'm too proud to say that I have any weakness, and then for the Lord to work through that weakness.
Yes.
Well, now there's no miracle there. It's just me.
Yeah, that's so good, Lyndsey.
And so I've been thinking so much about, even this week because it's easy to be, I've been a part of a church forever, and so I should have it together, or I work at a church, and, so you're sitting in these small groups and you're like, can I say this? Can I say on the podcast that I struggled with anxiety for so many years?
Right.
And it's like, yeah, you can.
Yeah. People who don't know anything about Christianity seem to be willing to say they have all sorts of problems and don't have any problem talking about it. And people who know the Lord, or say they do, want to hide. It shouldn't be that way. Mm-mm. We should be the people that understand forgiveness. We should understand human nature better than others. We should know what we're capable of.
Yeah.
It should be no surprise to us that we're sinners, that we've failed, that we've made bad choices. And we should understand that there's grace for that.
Yeah.
But we don't really believe that. What we think is, I have to earn it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I haven't earned it right now, so I'm going to hide this from you. Yeah. I deal with the same thing.
It's so crazy. Yeah. It's an exercise for sure of growing that vulnerability muscle a little bit. I think it totally has to do with being a pastor's kid, growing up. Like, my siblings read the Magic Treehouse books, and we got in so much trouble for that. Like, everybody in the church was like, "How could you let your kids read that?" And then we're not reading the Treehouse books anymore. So it teaches you to slowly,
Don't share yourself.
Don't share yourself.
You'll get judged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
But let's talk about glory as we're wrapping up here. Can you talk a little bit about it just in general?
So glory is one of those terms that I didn't understand for the longest time because It's a church word or a Bible word, and it's not a word that we use much. It gets used a little bit in our culture, but it's the idea of seeing someone in their best light or the fullest expression of who they are. So when we talk about God being glorified, there's this idea of seeing God as he really is, the fullness of who he is.
Yeah.
Of Jesus getting glory is to see him in the light of all that he's done, so that we don't miss any of the wonder and beauty and acclaim that he's due. That's sort of the idea of glory. And so the point that I wanted to make was that best friends are people who seek your glory. They want to see you glorified.
Yeah.
And this is part of the biblical view of friendship. It has its roots in Jesus. Paul, and so maybe we can read it in Ephesians 5 here. Says, starting in verse 25, husbands, love your wives. And this is the idea that I'm talking about. Love your wives as Christ loved the church. Remember, he's going back and forth this whole time between what it is for a husband and wife to love each other and what it is for Christ and the church to love each other. And this relationship. So it's always, how to put it, it's like he's speaking about both things at once.
Yeah.
Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. To what end? To what purpose? That he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor is the word here. In the NIV, it's a radiant church without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. And so the idea is that this love, this commitment of husband to wife, but I think it goes both ways, is meant to produce in this other person this perfection, if you will. And perfection sometimes is a word that we don't like, but let's say the fullness of who they can be.
Yeah.
So the best way I think about it is kind of take an example from something that Tim Keller preached, which is this idea of on a wedding day, a bride and a groom they come in their best dress. Of course, brides especially. You have their dress. Mm-hmm. And not just a beautiful, expensive dress, but a dress that makes them look good. So you probably tried on lots of dresses.
I did, yes.
Okay, yeah. And there were probably some that were beautiful that you tried on and you're like, it doesn't look beautiful. It doesn't make me look more beautiful.
Yeah.
So you put on all these dresses and it's like, that's the one that most, that looks the best.
Yeah.
And then on your wedding day, it's not only that, but it's a bride is surrounded by all of these people. There's makeup and there's hair and there's bridesmaids and we're steaming and we're right, like everything has to be just a certain way, because we don't want that bride we want her to be without spot or wrinkle or blemish or any other such thing.
Yeah.
So that when she walks down the aisle, she's glorious.
Yeah.
And it was only in the 11:30 service I kind of choked up a little bit because I was thinking about Heather. I got married in that room.
Oh my gosh.
And I was standing roughly where I would have stood when we got married 25 years ago. The room's been redone, and so it's a little different. But I know the aisle that she came down, and I still remember the look on her face. She was beaming. She was, glowing, radiant, glorious. And so here she comes down the aisle. And so what I was saying is like, that's what you want on a wedding day as a bride, to be glorious, and groom, do the best you can. But that's the idea. And so his kind of the metaphor is that essentially what we're saying is that someday we're going to stand before the throne of God, and this is how I want you to be standing there. Radiant.
Yeah.
Beautiful, without spot or blemish. I think Hebrews 12 is a passage I think of often, which is lay aside every sin and weight which clings so closely.
Yeah.
Similar idea. Let's get rid of some of these things that we need to get rid of so I can be who God made me to be.
Yeah.
And so there's this beautiful image of husband and wife or bride and groom standing at an altar before a minister and before God in their best dress, as if to say, this is who I can be.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect view, but it's our best attempt at saying, look at how beautiful I can be. Look at how I can be. Look at what's possible. And I think it's rather interesting that on a wedding day, husband and wife, bride and groom, are both everything they can be, and later, as they're naked together, are exactly as they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's what marriage is. It's both a striving for this is who I can be.
Yeah.
And this is who I am. And you get to see both of these things in me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the idea of glory, is that, so what I was saying, like theologically speaking, what this means is that when Jesus came, he didn't just die and was resurrected and, ascended to the Father and is now glorified just for his own glory. Yes, but also so that you could be glorified as well. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Is that we would be glorified with him. What does that mean? Again, I grew up with this. I didn't understand this term, but it's the perfecting of who God made you to be. It's you at your best, the very best you can be, spirit, soul, body.
Yeah.
And so the picture of marriage is really the picture of the church, both the way Christ loves the church and I think the way that a church body is meant to function together, which is in this kind of unique relationship where we're truly friends with one another. We've come close, we're vulnerable with each other, but for the purpose not of climbing over the other so that we can get to where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
But to be a best friend to another person, which would be to be someone who seeks the glory of the other person, so that you might become who you could be. I think marriage is the most concentrated version of this. It's the place where that I think can happen most, because you just, unlike any other relationship, you will know someone all the way down.
Yeah.
Everything about them. In a friendship, it's a little veiled, rightfully so.
Yes.
Right? But in a marriage, that union is so complete that I know everything about you. We're one flesh together. But really, it's just a picture of kind of the broader relationships that are meant to be happening within this Jesus community, which is we love and care for one another for the good of the other person. And so it's a picture of, it's a beautiful picture of what needs to happen inside of what ought to happen inside of a marriage, but also what can happen inside of a Christ-like community. This is how we love one another, is that we serve one another. That's how Jesus loved his disciples, so that they might become who they could become. And they did. It's a beautiful thing.
I had this image this weekend of when my dad walked me down the aisle. We get to the end, and the minister, who was my brother, he was like,
"Oh man,
who
what
gives
a day.
This woman?"
I'm not looking forward to this. Yeah, I have 3 daughters. I am not looking forward to that.
But I think my brother says, "Who gives this woman to be wed," or something to this man. And then my dad says, "Your mother and I," or her mother and I. And I was just thinking, whoa, when we get to this picture in heaven of each one of the people I go to church with, the people in my small group, Adam, when they're glorified in that moment of who gives Lyndsey to be here, and there's this whole group of people.
That's a cool image.
That would say we do.
Yeah.
Church on the Move does.
Yeah, that's really cool.
The V Hills do, the Hammondses do, like that image of just whoa, all the people, and then how many people I would stand with and say, yeah,
that's beautiful.
Your glory, I want you glorified.
Yeah, that's awesome.